So Sondors Metacycle, I feel like a lot of the videos I've seen, people just don't really cover some of the quality control issues on these bikes. Obviously it comes with great tires, they're high quality Michelin. These are really good tires, I respect that and appreciate that. Pretty much after the first 10 miles, both fork seals started leaking. This right one isn't that bad. Unfortunately, the one on the brake side is a lot worse, and this happened within the first few miles. Now the rider that's normally on this is about 200 pounds, which is a lot for this bike, and I'll kind of explain a little bit why. But the oil is leaking down onto the front brake, and it makes the front brake feel very spongy, and you can see right here it's just dripping right now. And the bike has I think at least 100 miles on it so far, so that's unfortunate. Fork seal automatically starting to leak. Couple things. One big one is that this main power wire, the clips holding it on broke off, and it started to rub right here on the tire, and thankfully we caught it and was able to zip tie this back on. But yeah, the quality control on this is just not very good, considering that one of the main power wires was rubbing on the tire. Notice that. And then there's also a cord back here that the plastic just kind of fell off. I also need to zip tie this on. That kind of sucks. You'll notice that this seat, it looks all super futuristic and nice, but I'm 140 pounds, 5'10", and I sit right about here. And as soon as I sit, my butt is touching the metal. So the whole time I ride it, I can feel it. It's not bad for me. I'm 140 pounds. But someone 160, 170, 180, 200 is just ridiculous. You're basically riding on the metal itself. So a lot of people have to put external cushions on this. If you're maybe 120, you probably wouldn't bottom out, but that's pretty bad on this. Another thing is when you're actually on the bike, a couple things, although they're small, the peg is round. So whenever you actually put your foot on it and you're standing up, it kind of digs in. I wish the pedals were a little bit more wider and flatter. On some other motorcycles like Yamahas and others, it's a more flat, not a round, because the round kind of digs in. Also, whenever you put your feet down, for me, these kind of stick out right where you want to put your foot down, which is uncomfortable. Thankfully, they do kind of pop up. That's good. Another thing is whenever you have the kickstand down, whenever you reach to grab it, you hit the peg too. So there's just some ergonomics that aren't great. And then if you notice, on a lot of Yamahas, they'll have a little stick that sticks out right here to where you can just grab it really easily. But on this, it's a little bit hard to find. You've got to kind of reach down. And one other thing I'd like to point out is that whenever this does come up, it physically smacks the frame. So you can see there that it's hitting the frame a little bit, which is not very good. Another thing, whenever you're actually riding, this basically hits right here the whole time, which isn't bad, but a lot of times I like to kind of tuck in and put my leg right here, and the first thing that hits is right there, so that doesn't feel good on both sides. There's not really a place where you can kind of grip it easily. Cockpit up here, the screen, really, I don't know why, this should be 3 inches further up and facing you more. It's way too far down and out. That's kind of a pesky thing that's annoying. The brakes feel slightly better than mountain bike brakes, unfortunately. Now I can't speak to the front brakes, which obviously should be better than the rear brakes, but they have oil all over them, so they're very spongy and they're not very good. But I mean, that's because I think it has oil all over it. I do wish that the rear brake would be on the right foot peg rather than this, although I get it. The first maybe 100 miles of owning this bike, in the first 6 months, apparently this module up here gave out, and Sondors had to send a replacement under warranty, thankfully. But the bike was having a lot of issues electrically and wouldn't run, and I can't remember, but had to replace that, and thankfully that fixed kind of most of the issues. When the bike is fully charged, the engine braking is almost non-existent, to where that's a big thing on motorcycles. It's really nice to be able to just rely on the engine braking for most of your braking, but on this thing, when it's fully charged, for some reason it doesn't really engage the engine braking that much, so you have to manually brake. But once you're down a little bit on the battery, when you fully let off the throttle, it does have a very nice feel to the engine braking. Power is nice and kind of gentle, nothing too crazy. Definitely a lot of fun to ride. Probably my biggest complaint other than that is the suspension is just it's just not very good. I mean, the suspension, especially the front forks, are just very two-dimensional. You know, like a Ninja 300 or a Yamaha or a Honda 300 would feel a lot better than this bike. Whenever you're going over even minor speed bumps, it's very there's not great rebound, compression, or any controls on it. And normally Japanese sport bikes just have, as is, even though you can adjust them, a much better feel to the forks. These are definitely not very good at all. In summary, there's a lot of other details that I can go into. I just wanted to speak to the quality control and ergonomics and feel generally of the bike. But in my opinion, is it worth it? Like, would I get something else? And to be honest, 100%, I would probably get a R3 or like a CBR 300, just the naked version of that bike, for a lot of different reasons, but just mainly quality. You know, if you're going to spend $3 to $4 grand on a motorcycle, having something that's arguably reliable, you can, you know, fill up the fuel with less than 10 minutes, and many other reasons, the braking, the maintenance, the parts. You know, you don't buy a CBR, a Honda, and the fork seals start leaking off the bat. And there's a lot of ergonomics, you know, just how this feels and how all the things, it's just like, it feels like a Chinese motorcycle, and a lot of quality control things are lacking. A couple other small things is on the indicator, you have to click it back into place, which is just stupid. I like the ones you just press it in once you're done. So that's a small pesky thing that is kind of annoying. One of the other large complaints I have is, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the riding angle, but whenever you're on the bike going down the road, it feels very loose and snappy, which is good, but because you're not pressed into it, you're just kind of like upright. After like just a few minutes of riding, your wrist on the right-hand side, not the left hand, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just doesn't do it on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, you're always going like this and kind of having to fight it, and your right wrist just gets very tired. I found it helps to kind of put it over and kind of lock my speed in and hold it right there. But that's one of the seat bottoming out right here, my wrists hurting, are like, and then the suspension and then the leaking stuff. I mean, that's a lot. But some of my biggest complaints, I think. A couple other things. One is whenever it's raining or there's any sort of moisture outside, you can even see it right here, there's some puddles. It literally sprays and splashes up water into the battery compartment, which is really, really dumb. I don't know why they have that. And I don't even think there's an actual drain to where once water pools up in there, it drips out. The owner mentioned he had some issues with that and had some electrical things, so that's something to note. You can see the forks are continuing to leak. There's a drop of oil right there. Rear shock feels okay. It feels better than the front shock. But one other thing to note on this is you got to think how you're going to change the rear tire. Now, I don't personally know. I'll have to look this up, but it's not as easy as a sport bike where you can just pop out the bolt, remove the chain, and remove it. There's not a splash guard for the rear shocks. A lot of bikes have a plastic cover up here where it won't splash and spray onto the rear. There's also electronics behind here that you can spray water onto, so I wish it did have a better splash guard. It does have this back here, but normally that doesn't catch at all. One thing we just found out is I let one of my family members just take this around the parking lot, and I have the keys in my pocket right here, and they went all the way down there about a quarter mile that way, and no indication that the key wasn't on. So I don't know how far away it will tell you that you don't have a key on you, but basically from my experiences, you could probably take this at least a mile, maybe more, maybe infinitely. If you have it on and the key was near it when you turn it on, somebody could just jump on or push you off and take the bike wherever. I'm not 100% sure on that. I haven't tested all of that, but just taking around the parking lot a quarter mile, didn't have any notification that, hey, you don't have the key on you. So something to note. The braking is good. It feels like I'm on a mountain bike, but when you're going 40 miles an hour with hydraulic brakes on a mountain bike, it's just not designed to do that. And that's how it feels on this bike. I personally have a Yamaha R6, so it's very difficult to compare those two very different bikes. But if you're coming from other motorcycles, a tendency that I found was obviously normally your clutch is on this side, but your rear brake is on this side. This copper washer was kind of, you can see how it's bent here to the side, and it was leaking a little bit. I tightened it back up. I don't know if it seems like it just needs to be replaced and centered better when it's tightened.